covering the entire body, as I was saying before, it's not possible for one company to develop alone. And so our strategy is we develop certain things, and sometimes our strategy is a combination of we develop, we acquire, we collaborate. So in some cases, we needed to acquire to accelerate our development, and in some cases, we collaborate. And in many other cases, we do our own thing from scratch. Back in time, nobody understood the benefit of textile and why textile could become a significant contender in medical devices. But what changed recently is all reimbursing body in Europe, in Canada, and in the United States, at least, just to name a few regions, they're imposing some level of compliance by the patient in order to qualify, for the doctor prescribing to qualify for reimbursement. When you look at that and you see why patients are not complying today and why doctors who are prescribing, they're at risk of not getting their full payment, because the medical device they're issuing today require training by someone to the patient, require onboarding, require skin preparation in the case of measuring for arrhythmia, and require patient enduring the new form factor they are learning to use. So, if you have to shave someone and then put an adhesive on their body and ask them to wear it for 14 days, most likely they're gonna develop skin irritation and they won't be able to tolerate it for that duration. So if they take it off after 2-3 days, the reimbursement will go down. We studied that very well, and we realized that our product, if we develop a product that you can wash and dry, you don't need to shave, you don't need to prepare the skin, so you reduce a lot of the labor costs that the clinic has to do, you eliminate all the onboarding stuff, and then automatically the patient is feeling comfortable. Over 21,000 patients tell us that they forget about wearing our product after 2-3 minutes. And so as a result, you're getting a very high level of compliance, and reimbursement is at the highest. So that's a very important reason why doctors are using us. Second is, because we collect many modalities, unlike you have to ask the patient to have a blood pressure device, a heart rate device, and a thermometer, and go on a scale, the more you offer, the less compliance you're gonna have. So we're just a much easier solution for the system to use our product. And as a result, in Canada, we had spent no money on marketing, no money on, we didn't have any sales team except this week. We hired our first officer of sales actually last week, Wednesday or Tuesday. But I wanted to make sure the product has receptions with the least amount of push. I wanted to see if it has a natural reception, so it worked very well. Dozens and dozens of clinics using the product, lots of national programs, lots of cardiologists, and I believe we're becoming the gold standard and the choice that patient love, family love, because it goes beyond just monitoring. It tells a story. It tells a story of connectedness. It tells the patient family that mom and dad are okay, they're doing this. It just makes everyone collaborate in the health of their loved ones differently. We've acquired approximately 5 companies over the last year and a half. One called MMHG, millimeter mercury, stands for an ambulatory blood pressure company. That was a pretty important medical device, an AI company. That company had a partner, was owned by a number of shareholders. One of them was of interest to us, is an A&D Medical. It's a very large Japanese company. So we acquired that company, and the shareholder became shareholders of Myant. So we did it 2 years ago. Then we acquired a cardiology clinics with 34 cardiologists working full-time for us. And the reason why we needed to buy that, because I wanted to have the entire experience. We didn't want to be just selling a textile. It's not about selling textile for us. It's about delivering an outcome. But you can't do an outcome unless you understand how you deliver services. So we're digitizing now how doctors could examine patients from far away, how we're developing new type of model, and how we're developing kind of a continuum of care as a new type of lifestyle prescription. So we have this vision that when a patient is discharged after a visit, there'll be a digital prescription that could include pharma, but as well as a lifestyle prescription. That could be sleeping, eating, exercise, but our system will track the evidence against that. So it's a very new form because the goal is to enable this longevity, or for people to live younger, much longer. And we're trying to put practical solution in it. Then we acquired a sleep apnea company that was very important to us. And if you notice, we're buying a lot of companies in the cardiovascular, metabolic assessment and disease, because we want to really be relevant, because there's an unmet need. A patient could have 3 or 4 comorbidities by the time they get to 70 years old in Canada. That's an average. 70% of the people over the age of 63 have 2 or 3 morbidities. So that's 2 or 3 separate visits, that's 2 or 3 separate devices, and 2 or 3 separate drugs, and nobody knows, for the most part. So we wanted to focus on that and enable a solution that is leapfrog all the existing devices and enable a completely new solution. So we acquired a blood pressure company, a sleep apnea company, a clinic company, and an advanced material company in Switzerland that really helped us develop a slightly better electrode in some cases. And we acquired a sophisticated AI-based company to interpret the data differently and to keep it all at a very high level of security. So the combination of those companies gives us, and Figure 8 recently, a Boston-based company in the MSK. These are the companies we acquired over the last year and a half. AI, before AI, we used to refer to AI as a signal processing and correlation-based model. You know, AI wasn't fashionable, but people would say, oh, we're doing some AI, but essentially they were just doing a correlation-based model, and based on what you input into the model, it gives you a known output. So that was predominantly signal processing, and that was pretty much needed then. But AI, as of a year ago, Anthony, is a very different beast. The ability to interpret nuances in the data is game-changing. You cannot interpret the level of data because no human could interpret that data. So for example, I'll give you an example. We're transmitting 3 lead EKG, each one at 320 hertz, sampling continuously, right? Plus core body temperature, plus the biomechanic data, plus breathing. I mean, no doctor could sit back and develop a correlation-based model, because even the correlation-based model was an inference from 10,000 patient studies. It didn't take into consideration ethnic background, social determinant, diet, spiritual, religion. There's so many things that changes the outcome of someone based on their diet, you know. So, and there's so many people are predisposed to diseases that you can't wait for a correlation model. You have to be able to predict it early on. And you can't predict it sometime only from one biomarkers. Like, for example, in heart disease, people think, okay, if I measure blood pressure, if I measure ECG, that should tell me what's going to happen. Not completely true. There are many things in the human body that emit clinical tells that are ignored because the way doctors are trained, especially specialists, are trained on specific things. They're not trained on the entire body. So, you know, and often there is no requirement for those things. Like, I'll give you a small example. In heart failure, it's a very big problem. If you get into heart failure, most likely you're not going to come out of it, unfortunately, given what the system is. But if you have to wait for fluid, because currently they measure heart failure through, you go on a scale, they measure heart failure risk, I should say. They ask you to go on a scale to see if you have if you have a more weight, which they infer that you retain more water, so they can give you an additional pill to pee it off, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't tell you the whole story properly. Other systems, they measure sonically if there's a fluid in your lungs, which is a little bit too late. But one of the way of predicting that you're going to have an episode is you start seeing swelling below the knee, right? But nobody have developed a device to measure swelling below the knee. They just develop a device because the reimbursement doesn't care about predicting. The reimbursement said, okay, if someone in front of you have those diseases, measure them, tell me the unit number, and this is how you get paid. So it's not easy to deploy prevention. There is no reimbursement for prevention, which makes it very difficult for doctors and companies to innovate. In 2020, during COVID, I realized that what we have, even though we had spent at that time 10 years in development, that it wasn't good enough. That all we're gonna do is develop a textile base with some sensors that we have innovated, and some will be off the shelf. That didn't give me enough depth or a high level moat to compete in the future or to sustain. Because part of the strategy is why I needed to have 10, 15, 20 years runway, because it's a very, very difficult challenge making textile a bidirectional interface for clinical purpose. And what bidirectional means, it can sense, but it can also deliver back to the body therapy, right? So in 2021, I started looking, how do I get deeper into molecule manipulation? How do you develop engineered particles? You know, like you hear a lot now about developing meat in a lab, or developing rare earth in a lab, or advanced materials. All of those things, you know, you can do. But with AI, now they are developing all sorts of new molecules, all sorts of new materials that mankind didn't know existed. And what pushed me to think like this is Google DeepMind announced, I think in 2022 or 2023, 1,000 new materials that mankind didn't know existed. So we tend to go look for materials by way of extraction. We go mine and take materials and do something with them. But what Google DeepMind, which is at the time the most advanced AI, developed materials in a lab that could enhance power, lithium-ion batteries, or drugs, or drug delivery system, or diet, or meat in a lab, all sorts of things that were developed in a lab. So then I started realizing, you know, I needed to get deeper into the science. And so when this building came about, it had hundreds and hundreds of patents, the most advanced research center in North America. And so I felt I needed to buy it. And so I did my best to acquire it, and we did it in 2023, and we kept every scientist. And we then, as a result, developed all sorts of new materials fairly quickly that I don't believe I would been able to do it on my own. And so it gave me all sorts of new edge in our ability to deliver materials that will be more relevant to our vision. And then I had to acquire new machinery, and then we had to acquire those companies to give me a complementary anchor pieces to allow us to go the distance without worrying about someone easily knocking us off, because those things are of concern to me. That, you know, if you have a low-level technology and easy to replicate, you won't be able to survive, especially if you're in Canada. It's not a competitive landscape. It doesn't have the financing support to grow, and so I had to choose something that, you know, constantly give us more relevancy. And as a result, we managed to survive. Because it's a completely new category, it required first a high level of credibility. And so the choice for me was, I want people to be obsessed with it. I don't want this to be a commodity or a fashionable device that you just change it the next day. I want it to be a product that you depend on. And I'm not, in the beginning, our focus is not to sell it at large. There are 1 billion person plus in the region that we work with, or we want to work with, living with cardiovascular disease. And these people have a serious problem. So I want to be relevant to them at first. That's my area of focus. To be relevant, you need to publish papers. You need doctors to trust it. You need doctors to, you know, to recommend it. So it took us a long time to get to that level. So our first channel is in cardiology specialty clinics. And what we do there, we offer best-in-class screening for arrhythmia and related cardiovascular disease. And we're adding sleep apnea, hypertension, COPD. So we want to be relevant to the entire clinic, as opposed to relevant to 1 or 2 doctors in each specialty clinic. Because in each specialty clinic, excuse me, you have the electrophysiologist that you do business with if they have a Holter product. But if you have the sleep apnea, if you don't have sleep apnea, they use a different device, or they recommend, or they ignore, or whatever. So we want to be relevant to each clinic, and we want doctors and patient and family of the patient to be obsessed with the reliability of this product. And to get to that level, you need to spend a lot of time. And so we're at our first step. We managed to get dozens and dozens of clinics using this product, and we have a very high success rate. And when you tell a patient, listen, do you want an adhesive or do you want this? They jump into this. At first they say, a bra or a chest band? Are you sure it's gonna get, because they're worried. When they start seeing doctors recommending it, so what we did to really make sure it's an obsessive product, we added a call center, even though it's not even needed. When you issue a halter, typically, you just issue it, people return it, and then you scan the data. But in our model, data is transmitted real time. If a patient battery is low, we call them. If a patient is not wearing the product, we let them know. If a patient's signal is not there, we let them know. So we just want to make sure we're preparing for our next phase. And our next phase is truly not to just sell the textile, is to deliver peace of mind through managing the outcome. That's really who we want to be. And if you want to get to that level, you can't just get excited about selling a product for a price. You have to sell outcome. And that's the most difficult phase of any company that want to be in that business. Because you're promising something that to some extent you're not 100% in control of. You just want to narrow the gap through the ecosystem of product offering between guessing and evidence, right? So if you wear our product and you have the data going and your family member are consuming part of the data and your doctor could consume. So what happened? If you're in doubt, you can now call your doctor, and the doctor could, while you are in doubt, could look at your data together at the same time. They could replay a moment in the past. So typically in medical device experience today, you always complain because you don't get to talk to your doctor the day you have an issue. And you only get a device on you when a doctor prescribes it. So if you look at that journey, so imagine this. On a weekend, I had a heart palpitation, okay? If I remember, I'm gonna call the doctor on Monday, Tuesday. The doctor will say, come to my clinic. If I'm lucky, if I know someone, maybe in 60 days. Most likely it's 6 months. Okay, so I go in 60 days. And I try to remember what happened 60 days in the past, right? So the doc said, okay, let me issue a halter to see if I can catch what you complained about. That's the whole thing, is that let me catch it. No, I don't want to catch it. If you wear our product, you don't have to guess. The data is flowing, it's stored. You can still talk to the doctor in 60 days, but you can relive that moment 60 days ago with evidence. And then if this doctor is not giving you the right advice, or you feel they're not giving the right advice, you can share the data with another doctor. So as a result, what do we solve? We solve accessibility in one hand. We solve peace of mind to the family member who's dealing with their patient, often from far away, as I mentioned. You reduce the anxiety for the patient, and you deliver a business model to the doctor that otherwise cannot get. So I want to perfect that model first before I worry about other channels. Because in the end of the day, patients need to give us the best rating. And that's not easy to get. That's a long effort. And we have a lot of issues still as a company we need to overcome to really get to that position. But then we're going from specialty clinic, we're going to hospitals, which will be on our platform soon. And then we're gonna go to family doctors, and then we're gonna go to elderly care facility. And over time, once we establish that, we'll start going with third-party partners into additional domain of screening and management, etc. But it doesn't have to be all directly on us, but it will be either SKIIN Direct or powered by SKIIN. So it doesn't matter what the brand, you'll always see reference of the SKIIN product, either powered by SKIIN or a direct SKIIN product.